Okay, so welcome. Thank you for tuning in. So whether you're watching this live or on the replay, we appreciate you. Cersei and I are passionate about giving you the knowledge, resources, and support you need to take control of your health. So our group, believe it or not, has tripled over the last 2 months since we had our last Healthy Habits speaker, Dr. Neil Bernard. So every few months, Cersei and I like to go live to provide you with an expert on a specific topic relevant to helping you take control of your health. And today we're covering overcoming emotional eating and food addiction, something that many of us have struggled with or are even currently battling. So if you have any questions or comments, please pop them in the chat box. We'll try to take as many questions as we can, either live or on the replay. So I'm going to turn it over to Cersei, and she's going to introduce our very special guest, the amazing Chef AJ. Cersei.
Awesome. Okay, Chef AJ is a rock star in the plant-based community. She has been devoted to an exclusive plant-based diet for over 43 years. She is the host of the television series Healthy Living with Chef AJ, which airs on Foody TV. She is a chef, a culinary instructor, and a professional speaker. She is also the author of the popular books Unprocessed, The Secret to Ultimate Weight Loss, and her most recent book she co-authored, which is Own Your Health with Glenn Mercer. So buckle your seatbelts as we have a dynamic conversation around emotional eating and food addiction. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the amazing Chef AJ.
Thank you. Hi.
Hey, good.
How can I help you? No.
So Chef AJ, if you could start, because you have an amazing story around overcoming food addiction and emotional eating. So could you just start by just telling us, how did you get here to be 43 years in the making of eating this way and overcoming all of this? Tell us your story.
Okay, I wrote a whole book about it, so I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version.
Yes.
So I was born in 1960 in Chicago to a morbidly obese mother and a normal weight father. And I only say that because when one or both of your parents are overweight or obese, it increases your probability of being so. But I don't want people to give up hope if both of their parents were overweight or obese, because truthfully, genetics loads the gun. It's our diet and lifestyle that pulls the trigger. It just makes us more the possibility of becoming overweight or obese is greater. And they know this from, identical twin studies, twins that are separated at birth and they follow them. They're more like the biological parents generally than the adoptive parents. So I did not have really healthy eating modeled for me growing up. We were Jewish, I still am, but that's how we ate this. It was the standard American diet, but it was with a Jewish twist, which means it was very high in fat and sugar and salt, just like the standard American diet, and lots of animal products, things like that. And for whatever reason, I was born with a very innate compassion for animals, and I didn't want to eat them. And we didn't have internet in 1960. We didn't have Neil Barnard or PCRM where we could find out that eating a plant-exclusive diet is not only healthy, but probably the healthiest diet that one could have. And so I always knew I loved animals, and I didn't have the language of vegan in 1960s. And I didn't want to eat them. I didn't like them. I just thought it was weird and gross. Like, why? I don't get it, because we had a pet dog, and I'm like, I wouldn't eat my dog, so why are we eating other things? And the things is, as a Jewish person, some of the things we ate were really gross. But the nice thing about being Orthodox Jewish is there's a lot of things we didn't eat. And I say that because there are no really inherent taste preferences in human beings other than that for sweet. Breast milk is sweet. Every taste preference pretty much in every culture is learned. And that's why in some cultures, they could eat crickets and they think they're delicious. They can eat certain organ meats that Americans would like. That's disgusting. But we develop taste preferences for what we habitually eat. And that's why, what do you like better, pad thai or enchiladas? Well, one is not necessarily better. It's generally what your culture, what you're used to. And because I was Orthodox, I didn't taste a lot of animals that other people develop taste preferences for it. A lot of people think things like lobster and shrimp and
That's true.
clams and clam are delicious. I mean, if you never have something, you can't think it's delicious. And so that was not allowed in my religion, nor was bacon or pork. And so, you know, I didn't need it because I never tasted it. And, you know, when you think about it, the only reason animal products are delicious for people that think they are is because of the sauces we put on them that are made with plants. I mean, very few people eat, I mean, yes, people do eat sushi and people, but how many people eat sushi without dipping it in soy sauce made from soybeans, right? Very few people just eat raw animal products. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some that do. So it's the plants that always make them delicious. And the thing about bacon is, you know, what makes bacon delicious is all the sugar, fat, and salt. It's not the pig that's delicious. So I didn't grow up eating a lot of animals. Yes, I would never eat fish as a child just because it grossed me out, because a lot of times it was served with the head on. You could see the eyes and I'm like, I'm not eating that. I mean, I probably ate canned tuna, but I didn't eat very many animal products. And I knew I had a disgust for them. And so my mom would make them in ways that it didn't look like it. So like she didn't give me like a bone in anything. I couldn't do that. But if there was chili and I had some ground beef, you know, I ate it, whatever. Because I remember even saying I don't want to eat animals and, you know, oh, you're going to die. You know, we didn't have the information there. You know, people today still think that you won't get enough protein if you don't eat animal products, when in fact, plants have all the proteins you need, and all the large animals in the world that have walked throughout human history that are herbivores get plenty of protein from plants. We don't get our protein from the animals, we get it from the plants that they ate in the first place. So I knew I wanted to go in that direction. And I did become vegan when I was 17. That was almost 44 years ago. But the problem was I was not a healthy vegan. And I first became fat when I was 5 years old. And we had a lot of processed food in the house. You know, we didn't just have like Trixer for kids. We had every kind of kid cereal out there. And, you know, I wanted the toys so bad. I remember that. But we had everything, Lucky Charms and Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and Fruity Pebbles and all these foods that I know now aren't really food, but we had a lot of processed food. My mom made real food too, but there was just so much just junk food in the house. We were from Chicago, so instead of Lay's potato chips, where bet you can't eat just one, we had Jay's potato chips. So I was, like I said, fat from the age of 5. And at the age of 11, I was 160 pounds. Now that might be considered normal in today's world, but let me tell you, when you're only 5 feet tall, it is, and 11 years old, that is obesity. So that's how I was most of my life. And it really wasn't until because I was fat as a vegan. I actually did a talk at Dr. McDougall's conference called From Fat Vegan to Skinny Bitch, which you can find on my YouTube channel. And I was pretty much fat until I was almost 52 years old. So I've only been thin now for about 10 years. So being vegan is wonderful. I recommend it for everyone for health reasons, especially now for planetary health and of course for animal compassion. But I'm an example of what not to do. And what I did for a long time, at least for the first 26 years when I was vegan, is I didn't eat any fruits and vegetables. And that is not healthy, regardless of how you're eating. So I was a junk food vegan, or a vegetarian, as some people would say. And I know now that that is because I was a food addict. And food addiction is a terrible name for a disease. They need like a PR firm to come rename it. People have suggested something like dopamine deficiency disorder, because in reality, you cannot be addicted to food or eating, because you would die if you didn't eat. But I do believe it's possible to be addicted to particular foods. And I wouldn't even really call them foods because they're highly processed and refined food-like substances, but they generally come in the area of the refined carbohydrates, sugar, flour, and alcohol. And sugar and flour go through the exact same refining process as drugs and alcohol. And for a certain segment of the population, and I don't know what these numbers are, the experts that I've interviewed said something like 17% of people. I would argue it's probably higher. 1 out of 7. I would argue it's probably higher, just because there seems to be a direct correlation between food addiction and obesity. And we are now at, I think, is it 43% obesity rate, over 70% overweight. Yeah. So it wasn't until I was in my 50s that I even heard this concept of food addiction. I was so excited because I figured if this was a thing and I had this disease, then there was a way out of it, and there is. But the problem is nobody likes the solution to addiction, because there really is only one. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's abstinence, and it's not fun and it's not sexy. It's effective, but the problem is most people in general can't do it, and people with addictions have a really, really hard time doing it. You know, people say, oh, you know, let's have everything in moderation. Really? We want child abuse in moderation? You know, no, I mean, I think that is the stupidest saying I have ever heard, because clearly as a country or as a world, we can't moderate. You can't moderate your use of an addictive substance if you're an addict, because if you could have, you would have. You know, most people that come to me aren't like, you know, 20 years old needing to lose 5 pounds. They're mostly women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that have struggled with this idea of food addiction and their weight their whole lives. And so people are looking for these plans, and these are very popular in these programs that tell you to weigh and measure your food. You know, let's just have a little bit of these toxic, poisonous substances. Can't do it. If you could have done it, you would have done it. So weighing it on a scale, it's like saying to an alcoholic, you know, the problem is you drink too much. So let's just put your alcohol in a smaller glass and see if that works. It's not going to work. Or, you know, you have a problem with vodka. We're gonna do light beer. No, it doesn't work. Abstinence is the solution. It always has been. You know, it was it in the 17th? I'm not very good with dates in history, but I think his name was Saint Augustine, and he said, complete abstinence is always easier than perfect moderation. It is. Now, if you are one of those rare people like my husband, who, even though he doesn't drink alcohol, when he did, could have a glass of champagne, you know, once a year at a wedding, or a rich dessert on his birthday, and you are happy with your weight and your health, do it. The thing is I don't know very many of those people who can.
Yeah. You know, what you said about just the culture in terms of the data and the number of people who are suffering with overweight and obesity, that the problem is widespread. And we were having this conversation with a few people from our group that it's different with food than it is with drugs, in the sense that, you know, the social acceptability of eating junk food is so high.
Right.
Where, you know, you're not going to go to a party, you're not going to go to a church function and have a platter or a buffet of cocaine, right? But you will have a platter or a buffet of donuts and fried foods and things that are just going to, you know, really just destroy your body. And it's kind of reinforced, it's popularized and almost viewed as cool. So
because everybody's an addict. And, you know, I remember interviewing a minister once, and his talk was why going to church actually will make you fat. You are so right when you use the word socially acceptable, because eating junk food is socially acceptable. It's the norm. And just because something is the norm doesn't mean it's normal. But also the big, another problem is it's readily available, not just at every church pop-up or soccer game, but think about it. Like, why, when I go to Petco to buy a leash for my dog, is there M&Ms at the register? I don't know any dog that is supposed to eat chocolate. Same thing, you go to Michael's, which is a craft store, Joanne, which is a fabric store, Home Depot, which is a hardware store. I understand that food is in stores that sell food, but why is it everywhere now? Everywhere you go. Hospitals. And I'm not talking just about the cafeteria, but hospitals have vending machines, even in the parking lot, where you can buy Red Bull and Cheetos. It's profit, you know, it's so affordable, junk food, because the crops that are used to make it are so heavily subsidized by our government. That's why it's not really fair to say like fruits and vegetables are so expensive, because if things cost what they were, McDonald's wouldn't be 99 cents, right? But you're right, it is socially acceptable, but I think everybody is addicted. It's just that it varies in degree. So and there's like it's like on a continuum. Some people more than others, and it's become so convenient eating processed food, eating fast food. People can't even imagine what their life would be like if they went back to eating the way our ancestors, as early as their grandparents did. Because many people don't even know how to cook. I once had a client, she was 44 years old, and I'm not kidding, she did not even know how to microwave a baked potato. Like she was like, well, how do you do this? And I'm like, really? Because like there's a button on it that says potato, so you push it, you know. So I mean, we've gotten so far away from eating anything that resembles food. And you know, once you're this concept, there's two wonderful doctors named Dr. Doug Lisle and Dr. Ellen Goldhammer, who wrote a book called The Pleasure Trap. And once you're in the pleasure trap, it's really hard to get out of. And so that, you know, that's what a church is. It's a congregation of people stuck in the pleasure trap, whether it's a Jewish church or a Christian church or, you know, you know, Girl Scouts. Oh my God, Girl Scouts. Don't get me
Oh,
wrong.
the
They're
cookies, yeah.
horrible. But my God, they're like little drug
Yeah,
pushers. Literally,
yeah,
they
yeah,
are drug
yeah.
pushers.
Yes, that is so funny. So, so how did you, so give us some insight on how you got out of that, because like you said, we're so bombarded by all of these things. It's almost like you can't run, you can't hide. So how how did you navigate your way out of that system?
Yeah. So for me, you know, I've heard people say that people only change when the pain associated with change is less than the pain of staying the same. And I was in pain. So what happened is when I was 43 years old, I had been vegan now for 26 years, obese, junk food vegan, weighing as much as 200 pounds, and I'm only 5'5".
Right.
And I woke up bleeding after using the restroom. And it turned out I had what they call edematous polyps that were riddling my colon. And these are the kind that if you don't remove them, they always become cancer. But because I hadn't literally eaten like any fruit and vegetable for like 43 years, because I was having Coke Slurpees for breakfast every day with 8 pumps of vanilla syrup. I was having regular Dr. Pepper big gulps for lunch, 48 ounces, because back then that was the largest size. Now I believe you can get a 256-ounce soda at 7-Eleven with free refills. And so because I didn't eat a diet that had any fiber, I developed these polyps. And I had many relatives in my family that died of colon cancer or actually had their colon removed. So I did have the family history that, like I said, primed the pump, loaded the gun. But it was my horrible diet of, you know, candies, cakes, cookies, pies, and ice cream, albeit vegan, and lots of caffeine and sugar that pulled the trigger, because I wasn't eating any fiber from fruits and vegetables. And so they couldn't remove them during the colonoscopy as they normally would with calipers, because my colon was in a state of disarray. So they said I'd have to come back and have like real surgery. And it's funny because today I went to the dentist, and I went to a pedi dentist till I was almost 40. I am the most phobic patient. When I was 19, I went in for a same day operation, a very minor operation to have something removed. And I was allergic to the general anesthetic. And instead I was in the hospital for 3 months. And I remember waking up in the recovery room, because I was a respiratory therapist at the time, seeing Harvey, my coworker, like with a tube, like if they couldn't get me to breathe, I mean, like my eyes were like, because I did not want to be on a ventilator ever. Like I saw my dad die on one and my grandmother. It's not fun to be on a ventilator. So they had that ambu bag and they were resuscitating me. And then somebody said, get the tube. And I'm like, God, please let me breathe. Let me breathe. So that traumatized me. So I'm like, I am afraid of everything now, which is a good thing, because I'm not going to rush into any kind of surgery. I would like to have a little nip and tuck here, but I'm just too afraid, right? And so what happened is I went to a place called the Optimum Health Institute. They have a campus in Austin that I've been to, but I went first to the one in Lemon Grove, which is near San Diego. And it was a remarkable place that, for the first time in my life, people in general, but specifically healthcare professionals like doctors and nurses, actually said that what we eat has a profound effect on how we look, how we feel, and even what diseases we acquire and which ones we can reverse. And even though I had not eaten animal products for 26 years, no dairy, no animal flesh, everything I was eating was inflammatory. So I was, instead of eating an anti-inflammatory diet like I do now, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, I was eating a pro-inflammatory diet: caffeine, sugar, flour, oil, salt. And they explained that for disease to exist anywhere in the human body, it has to be in a state of inflammation. That's why almost every disease ends in itis, right? And that it doesn't matter whether it's the common cold or stage 4 cancer, you have to have inflammation in the body. And so they explained that what I was eating it just was a wonderful place. It's basically like a detox in a way, because you eat 100% raw diet. That's mostly it was seeds, and they made like cheese out of seed. It was very bland. There was no sugar, no oil, no salt, no processed foods. And it, obviously it didn't taste very good, but that wasn't the point. What happened was there was like 300 people there, and they would give testimonials, people that were there for more than 1 week, how eating this way saved their life. And they had people there. There was almost every disease, from all kinds of cancer, even brain cancer, to lupus, to Lyme's disease. And they were giving these testimonials. And I thought, well, wow, if you can eat this way, and I'll do it. I'd rather not. I'll do anything not to have surgery.
Mhm.
And so I stayed on the diet for almost 2 years. It was really hard for me to be raw. It's not hard to be vegan, especially junk food vegan. It's not hard for me to eat the way I am. But the raw diet was a little hard for me. Like socially, I was cold a lot, but it's a very healing diet. And about 6 months after adopting that way of eating, I can still remember the day I checked into Optimum Health. It was July 6th, 2003. I remember it was right after the 4th of July. And that was just great because 4th of July is like independence. It's like freedom. And I'm like, that was the beginning of my freedom from these foods that were making me fat and sick. And about 6 months later, I had another colonoscopy and my colon was clear, clean, and pink, the doctor said, vascular like a newborn baby. And he thought I had actually had surgery somewhere else. I said, no, I just changed my diet. And he said, well, that's impossible. And the co-doctor, the one that was assisting in the procedure, I think she was from India, she goes, I believe you, after he left. So that's when my health started to improve. And that's when I stopped, white sugar and caffeine. It still took a little bit longer for me to figure out the weight loss piece. But then again, it's like my mom always said, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And it's like, when you have something painful in your life, it's never pleasant. I understand that. And especially at the time, nobody wants to hear, well, this is going to be the greatest thing that happened to you. Because no, I understand that. But I think if most people, and I'm sure there's going to be exceptions, but if most people are really honest and look back at some of the most horrible things in their life, whether it was a breakup, I don't want to say like a death of a loved one, of course, but things, they'll go like, wow, it's really good that happened because of this now happened. So if that hadn't happened, I don't know. I mean, I'd still probably be fat, and who knows, I might have had full-blown colon cancer and no colon right now. So now the next thing that happened is when I was 50, or right before my 50th birthday, I slipped in an office building. They had mopped the floor, but didn't put the sign up, which was good for me because it was a clear-cut case because it was caught on video that they, I mean, not that I couldn't fake a fall or a break like that, but it was a bad break. And because I was 50 pounds heavier than I am now, I couldn't use crutches. I couldn't use a walker. So guess what you get when you can't use either of those? You get put in a wheelchair for 4 months. And it was really an interesting experience. One thing I liked about being in a wheelchair, I mean, I didn't like it, but people were actually kind of kind. It was interesting because in LA, people are kind of rushing around, but people would, like open a door, or like if I was shopping, they would reach. So there was some element there that was like, oh, people are nice. I remember meeting an actor from my favorite show at Whole Foods, and I normally would be too shy to talk to an actor, but I'm thinking nobody's going to be mean to somebody in a wheelchair. So I remember that. I remember it was Kelso from Scrubs, and I had the courage to talk to him. He was really very, very friendly. But anyway, so when I was in the wheelchair, I couldn't even take care of like business, if you know what I mean. And it was very humiliating having your husband help you, or my husband, not your husband, but my, so I just didn't want my future to be that. And I said, I said to myself, I said, when I get out of this chair, I got to figure out, do something about this weight, because this is just, and then the knee, that was the other thing. See, this is the thing. If you want me to do something, threaten me with surgery and I will find a way out of it. So of course, what happened is the knee was the doctor saying, we have to fix this. And I'm like, I don't know, what are my chances? And so here's what they said. This is what I love. Because people love doctors, they respect them, but people a lot of times just do things without getting second and third opinions or research. And so this is what the doctor said, the orthopedic surgeon. He goes, well, if you have the surgery, either you'll get better, you'll get worse, or stay the same. And I said, well, that's the same thing that's going to happen if I don't have the surgery. I don't want those odds. I'll just stay like this. But because I was, the thing about being heavy, and this is why, when people say, oh, health at every size, well, maybe, but, not optimal health, because for every pound you're overweight, it's 5 pounds of additional pressure to your joints, like your hips and your knees. So that, in my job at the time, I was a pastry chef, which by the way, isn't an optimal job for a food addict, but that's another story. I was a executive vegan pastry chef. And, we stand a lot, and my knee would just hurt so much by the end of the shift. And my leg would be so swollen. And I remember the doctor said, well, have you ever thought about losing weight? And I'm like, no, I haven't. Wow, that's a great idea. No. But I remember that. And, I wanted to smack him. But then, when you think back, or when I think back now, which was almost 12 years ago, if that hadn't happened, it may not have given me the impetus to want to really solve the problem or figure it out. So then I went to my second place of healing and recovery. Optimum Health was great. There's one I found that's even better, and it's called the True North Health Center. It's in Santa Rosa, California, founded by Dr. Alan Goldhammer. And I was really basically given all the information I needed to succeed this time, because he's one of the few plant-based doctors that really understands food addiction and understands what I teach today for weight loss, which is not counting calories, it's calorie density. It's completely different. And having those two things married by the same person, and then plus Doug Lyle, Dr. Doug Lyle, a psychologist, they're really kind of sitting me down and explaining to me. Once I got the information, I was able to run with it. Some people, even with the information, it's still hard to do. That's why I think it's important you know your, like they say, your why, and they say you want a why that makes you cry, because if it's just you want to get thinner to fit into a wedding dress so you look good at your daughter's wedding, you probably will succeed short term. But if you don't have a strong, compelling reason, which generally has to do with something in the area of health or something, you know, I see the recidivism rate for addiction in general and weight loss in particular, you know, it's like 98%. So it's tough. It's like a very bad business to be in for me, because if I was in any other business with this dismal failure rate, I'd be out of business. But it's really hard. It's hard for people to lose weight. It's hard for people to not eat the foods that they love, that they're addicted to. But for those of us that can escape the pleasure trap, that have, will tell you it's worth it. It really is, because the clothes are so much cuter.
About how long did it take you to overcome like cravings?
Oh, you know, so, you know, when I was at Optimum Health, so I was locked up. And so I would say by the time I got home, you get there on a Sunday and you come home on a Sunday, by then it was gone, because it wasn't just the abstinence of eating the foods that cause the cravings, but they're feeding you with fuel, with jet fuel. And I mean like green juices and things like that really, really help, because, you know, greens have a compound in them. I think all cruciferous vegetables do. I could be wrong, but there's this compound called thylakoids that just stop the cravings for sugar. That's why I recommend in my program to eat vegetables for breakfast, eat greens for breakfast, to set your day up with these compounds that just, not only they block fat absorption, they turn off the hunger switch, and they fight cravings for sugar. So for me, that, you know, I would say by the time I got home, I didn't have those. Now, the first few days at Optimum Health were hell. The longer you've abused the substance and the more you've habituated to it, the harder it is going to be and the longer it's going to take. But depending on what your circumstances are, and that's why if people can go to a place like Optimum Health or True North, so that they're in an environment of complete rest, rather than trying to do this at home with a bunch of screaming kids or while they have to work, it's a lot easier if you can do it that way. But I would say, depending on the person, how long they've eaten poorly, I mean, people, it can be just a few days for some people, honestly, to detox. You know, even caffeine could be even longer, you know, just getting off caffeine. That, because I was getting off everything at once, caffeine, sugar. So, but like I said, I was in a situation where I was, you know, like locked up. And I think it is easier when you can do it away from home. Also, because see, if you're home and doing it and you haven't cleaned up your environment, those foods are going to always call you. And so I believe, and I've always said this, and people get mad at me, but I'm only teaching what I learned from all the doctors, because I host a summit called the Truth About Weight Loss Summit every year. And all the doctors say what I've been saying in one way or another, that if it's in your house, it's in your mouth. And so if you abstain from something and still have it in your house for your kids or your husband, the cravings will never go away, because cues in the environment will trigger cravings. So if you live in an unclean environment, I can't promise they'll ever go away.
Yeah, that's a tough one when you're living with households that everyone's on a different page concerning your health. So right now, AJ, you're notorious for the SOS, which is no salt, no oil, and no sugar.
Yeah.
Tell us, what does your day look like, and how because you don't seem deprived from anything, and I think a lot of people, when they hear that, they get scared, like, what am I going to do without sugar, oil, and salt? But the truth is that you could actually eat well without using those things once you get acclimated to the real flavors of real food. So give us an insight on what your life looks like now that you're on this journey of
Well, it's been a long
SOS.
time. I've been SOS free, and I'm actually SOFAS free, sugar, oil, flour, alcohol, salt, since it was August 1st. Not, so long now, I can't. 2008. It's been a long time. And you're right. Acclimated is another word for neuroadapted, neurological adaptation. And of course, if you've been eating a lot of sugar, oil, and salt, or sugar, fat, and salt, and you take it away, you're going to have some discomfort at first. The thing about neuroadaptation, people understand it in other areas. They just don't necessarily quite understand it with food right away. And if anyone has ever been in a movie theater and they've come late to the movie, it's dark and you can't see right away. You can't see your seat, and you don't just sit there and like, help. You just stand still for a moment, and then your eyes can adjust to the new level of darkness. And then you see, oh, there's an available seat, and you take it. Well, the same thing can happen to your taste buds. And the thing is, it takes a little bit of time. One of the reasons I don't eat sugar, oil, and salt is, well, first of all, I don't think they're healthy. And two of them, the sugar and the oil, are very calorically dense, i.e. fattening, is that Dr. Goldhammer explains that sugar, oil, and salt are not food. They're chemicals that we add to the food that fool our brain's satiety mechanism and cause us to overeat. And you never find sugar, fat, and salt in nature in any concentrated form. So in other words, if there's salt in nature, it's in the green vegetables. If there's sugar in nature, it's in fruit. And if there's fat in nature, it's in a whole food form like a nut, a seed, avocado. So you never find it the way that people are eating it now, like olive oil, salt, sugar, maple syrup, all that kind of stuff. The other thing that people don't realize is that sugar, fat, and salt are addictive on their own, but they become more addictive when they're combined. And basically that's what processed food and restaurant food is. It's the exact combination of sugar, fat, and salt that will addict you to their product. That's how the processed food industry did it. They did it knowingly with scientists behind closed doors once they understood that. And so we like food, we like eating because it not only encourages survival, but we get a neurochemical called dopamine that's released whenever we eat food. But the more calorically concentrated the calories, the more dopamine is released. So that's why we like foods that are higher fat and higher calorie, because we get more dopamine. So for neurological adaptation to occur with our taste buds, it can take some time of not assaulting them with so much sugar, fat, and salt. I mean, if you think about it, like I do a daily live broadcast called Chef AJ Live, and I had a chef on today who was 1 year old. He's like the youngest chef in the world, I think. He's a YouTuber. And it's so funny because when he was cooking, every time he put an ingredient in the bowl, he put it in his mouth. So he was putting oats in his mouth and, fruit in his mouth. It was really adorable. I mean, babies don't add sugar, fat, and salt to their food. I mean, babies might eat fat, like if you give them an avocado, but have you ever seen a baby or you ever see a mountain lion kill, an animal and then, salt it or sugar it? No. So this is a relatively new thing in the timeline of human history. Oil is not something that was used back in the day. It was a prize that was given to athletes in the Olympic Games that they adorned their body with. It wasn't put in their mouth. It's actually relatively recent that we started taking things like, grapes and processing it into oil and actually eating with it and cooking with it. So people have a hard time going from a higher fat, higher calorie diet to one that's lower, but that doesn't mean they won't enjoy it eventually. It's just that they won't stick with it long enough for the most part. And especially if they're in that unclean environment, if somebody else is eating pepperoni pizza, you're not going to really enjoy your steamed broccoli and sweet potatoes when there's pepperoni pizza, because you are genetically hardwired to always prefer the most concentrated source of calories for survival. And in nature, that was not processed food. It didn't exist. And so you're always going to be called to be eating the most high caloric thing in whatever environment you're in. But the thing is our ancestors throughout most of human history and through many parts of the world today eat unprocessed food. They don't eat processed food. They don't put a lot of sugar, fat, and salt in it. I mean, think of areas like the blue zones. Yeah, they might use some oil and things like that, but it's not like it is in the United States where everything is high in sugar, fat, and salt. It does take some time. Here's the thing. So oil is really easy to not use. because you don't need it to cook. I've got many YouTube videos showing how you can dry saute or saute with vegetable broth or water. Very easy to not use oil, and to bake without it is also very easy. There's so many substitutes. The only thing you really can't do without oil is fry, but frying is not good anyway. And you can use an air fryer and get everything to be crisp and delicious without oil. So oil's pretty easy. And if people want fat, there's nothing wrong with whole food fat like nut seeds, avocado, tahini. And so they'll still get, you know, that richness and that high caloric density, but in a whole food form with fiber and water. Whereas in oil, there's no fiber, water, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants, or micronutrients. So oil is actually probably the easiest. Now with sugar, we always love the taste of sugar and salt because we have taste buds on the tip of our tongue from this. And that's how our ancestors knew they were going in the right direction, because if berries were sweet, they were not poisonous. And we prefer the taste of salt because that was to prevent dehydration, because we didn't have bottled water delivered back in the day. And having a preference for salt was very, very important, but it wasn't from the salt shaker. We got it from eating vegetables, greens, which most people don't eat very many of these days. The other thing I forgot to mention is what's really interesting is sugar, fat, and salt never appear together in nature in any food. I mean, breast milk maybe, but that's, you cannot name one food in nature that has sugar and fat, fat and salt, sugar, fat and salt. But think about it, what's kettle corn? It's popcorn that's popped in oil that has salt and that has sugar on it. Like I call that the evil trinity, sugar, oil, and salt. But there's nothing in nature. So we weren't meant to activate those pleasure pathways with, it was only supposed to be one at a time. We had something sweet, we had something salty, we had something fatty. We never were meant to combine them. And when we do, it makes it even more addictive. So oil is really quite easy. Unless you eat out, then you're really not going to be able to avoid it. But as far as cooking and baking without it, you'll save money. You won't have greasy dishes to wash, and the endothelial lining of your blood vessels will thank you, because you won't be creating heart disease because you're taking the oil away, assuming you've already taken away the animal products. And sugar, believe it or not, is not very hard to do without, because you can use fruit, the whole fruit and nothing but the fruit. So anything people can do with sugar, I can make any kind of dessert without it. And I use dates. Dates is my primary sweetener. They are caloric. They have about 1,300 calories a pound, but they're still less caloric than sugar. And at least they're a whole food, which means they have vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals, antioxidants, and micronutrients. So they're kind of like, for me, dates were methadone to get me off the white sugar. And because they're a whole food, you actually get satisfied when you eat them. Whereas sugar, you're just going to keep eating it because you'll never get full just eating sugar. The hardest thing for people, believe it or not, is the salt. And, if somebody wants to do a program kind of like Dr. McDougall's starch solution, and they really can sprinkle just a little bit on the surface of the food, it's probably not the end of the world. But the problem where food addiction is salt is a very powerful appetite stimulant, and it causes you to eat more food. And so if weight loss is your goal, salting your food may not be the best thing. And people go, well, it doesn't taste good without it. Well, good, because if it doesn't taste good, you won't eat as much of it, if every meal has to be a 5-star meal, you might not have that much success in this arena, because food is supposed to be fuel. It doesn't mean that it can't be delicious, but it may not be delicious right away eating this way if you're used to eating the other way. But if you were born eating this way, and I know people who were, like Dr. Goldhammer's son, he's never had bread or cake or ice cream. I mean, Brussels sprouts are his favorite food because he doesn't know any different. The only reason you like that stuff better is because that's what you're used to. And if you have a kid and you don't feed him crap like dairy and macaroni and cheese and sugar, all these stupid smash cakes that these parents do, it just seems like child abuse. You will love the taste of natural food. You're designed. God wouldn't make a mistake. We are designed to love the taste of whole natural food without sugar, fat, and without sugar, oil, and salt. We're supposed to have fat, but not oil. It's just that, you can't know that right now. And I probably wouldn't have known that back then if you had told me either. And that's why going to a place like the True North Health Center, and even doing something extreme like doing a water fast, this can make this process happen sooner, so that you can love the food that will love you back and not make you fat and sick and addicted. It's a hard sell, because like you say, I think the social aspect is the hardest for people.
Yeah, so I'm glad you said that, AJ, because what we do here at the Daniel Fest is that the Daniel Fest pretty much is what you're talking about, which is a whole food, plant-based, no sugar, no oil, no salt, to give people that introduction to do this, because I think what you're talking about, a lot of people, it's hard to break away from it. You almost have to commit yourself to saying, I'm going to stay away from these foods so that you can get over the hump of adjusting to your taste buds. But if you never go through that hard spot, you'll never get to the other side. And I'm glad you're kind of giving us the real deal on it, that there's no magical moment. You're just going to stop eating all these processed foods, and then tonight the food is going to taste like joy. It takes time because you have to redo your taste buds. So I'm really glad you're just giving the real deal on this thing.
Well, it's like you have to recalibrate,
Yeah,
you know,
that's the truth.
the best thing is if you're going to have kids, don't mess them up in the first place, like my mom did, with
Yeah.
her addictions,
Yeah, passing them on. Yeah, so for those watching, if you have a question, feel free to pop it in the chat box there. And one question that I had for you, Chef AJ, has to do with emotional eating.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of us have struggled with kind of being on autopilot, and then when we get stressed out about something, something happens to us, we tend to find comfort in food. Maybe describe to us how you used to handle emotional eating versus how you handle it today. And maybe you don't emotionally eat, or when you do, you emotionally eat with something.
Yeah. Well, it's really funny because, once I feel like emotional eating and food addiction are like opposite sides of the same coin. And once I got rid of all the addictive foods in my diet, in my environment, I found I didn't emotionally eat, because it's not that interesting to overeat on whole natural food of a low caloric density. You're not going to get that much dopamine from it. That's why there's no arugula anonymous, because really very few people overeat on low calorically dense, high nutrient foods. For one, you don't get as much dopamine. So you're like, hey, I'm not really getting much from this. And also, when you're eating foods that high in fiber and water, you really get full. And so for me, really, once I understood this concept of food addiction, and it's not to say that people don't medicate with food, but they don't really medicate with broccoli slaw. I mean, there might be one in 1,000 that says, oh yeah, I overeat on carrots. But usually when people are overeating on vegetables, it's because they're restricting in some way, not eating enough calories and not eating enough starchy foods to give them that satiety. So, if you think about it, like when people smoke cigarettes, are they smoking for emotional reasons? I mean, how many people say, oh, I mean, is there such a thing as emotional smoking? No, it's a habit. It's an addiction. And I think with food, it's the same way. And because the truth is yes, people can eat for a variety of reasons other than comfort, other than hunger. But if hunger's not the problem, food's not going to be the solution. People eat because they're angry or tired or lonely or stressed or bored or anxious. But they also do other behaviors for that reason too. Sometimes they shop compulsively, or I know there's all kinds of different addictions. But so the idea is if people don't feel good, they want to feel better, and food is just one way to do it. But people have to understand that the emotional eating has to do more like with drug like behavior than the food, because they're not emotionally eating on spinach and broccoli and even apples or grapes or even sweet potatoes. It's always on these highly processed foods that'll give them the highest hit of dopamine. And again, if food's not the problem, if hunger's not the problem, food's not the solution. So if you have emotional problems or things like that, then you've got to find a way to solve them without food, or you're always going to use food or drugs or some other compulsive behavior like exercising or shopping or whatever the many things are that people do, social media addiction to try to feel better and numb out. And that I think that's a problem, in our whole society today, is nobody wants to feel anything anymore. It's particularly not bad. So they do all these numbing behaviors, which are not that great. So, there's an old saying, the only way out is through. And if, sometimes if you want the pain to stop, you got to be willing to feel it and work with a professional to work on that. And, the thing is like I said, it's that what a lot of therapists miss, unfortunately, is that the foods that people are medicating with have this addictive like property. And that's why it drives me crazy. These people that go to these eating disorders inpatient places, there are thousands of dollars, and a lot of times insurance doesn't pay. And they're told, well, you just have to learn to moderate it. No, you can't moderate an addictive food if you're an addict. These, you know, and I believe that even people, that if all we gave was this crap food to people, eventually if you give somebody a substance in a high enough dose for a long enough time, they too will become an addict. And yes, there's people that can eat just a little bit, but like I always say to people, like when I was growing up, before I became vegan, my favorite cookie was called the Mint Milano, Pepperidge Farm. And open up a bag of whatever your Mint Milano, you know, M&Ms with peanuts, whatever your favorite thing is, open up the bag, have 1 unit of it, and then close the bag. And if the bag is there in 6 months, like it would be for my husband, you probably don't need my talk. But if that bag is gone in 6 minutes, you probably do.
Yes, 6 minutes. Yeah.
So that's the thing. So to me, emotional eating is just food addiction. And when you get rid of the addictive foods, it doesn't mean you're never going to overeat. I overeat sometimes. Sometimes things are really good. But when you're eating food that's that calorically dilute and that nutrient rich, you really get so full from the fiber. That's the thing. All the addictive foods either don't have fiber, or the fiber has been destroyed or disrupted. So you don't get the same kind of satiety signals that you do, you know. And I tell people, like, I don't tell people to not overeat. I just tell them what to eat. I don't tell them when or where or why or how, because eventually their body weight will normalize when they're just eating fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. And you can put them in any combination you want, and there's so many different cooking methods. But again, if you were born with low D2 receptivity, that's dopamine receptivity, and if you're not doing anything else to feel good in life, like having, you know, meaningful relationships or exercising, which will give you those brain chemicals, you know, you're always going to rely on food. But, you know, there's things you can do. Like my new thing now is, I don't know how I got into this. I think I must have heard the Shirzai say this in one of their talks, to ward off Alzheimer's, do jigsaw puzzles. Now I'm addicted to jigsaw puzzles. I cannot stop puzzling. And like when I'm in a puzzle, like the last thing I'm thinking about is eating. I'm like just obsessed with finding that piece. And hours can go by and it's like, oh my God, I forgot to eat. You know, so find something else in life that's as engaging as eating. And it does say that, you know, people think, oh, your life must be so boring. No, my life is not boring at all. My life is very rich and it's full. It's just not, you know, it's just not the same thing. Like eating is not a,
sport.
It's I don't know how to say this. I eat to live now rather than live to eat. And it's just a much better way of being for me. I enjoy it more, where food is just, where I'm not obsessing about it, where I'm not eating compulsively or always thinking about when I'm going to get my next fix or when the next meal is. When you eat in this high nutrient manner, you get the appropriate amounts of hunger at the appropriate time, and you eat appropriate amounts of food. And it's just, and my food is as delicious to me. Like today for lunch, oh my God, I had Japanese sweet potatoes that were roasted and then chilled. And the reason is when you chill them, roast them and chill them and then air fry them, they're either just, they taste like marshmallows, toasted marshmallows or bread or something. And I had them in the air fryer and they were, you know, gooey on the inside. It was like toasted marshmallows and crunchy. And I had that with a big chopped salad, and I'm just really full, and I'm very, very satisfied with my food. My food is delicious. Yeah. And you just have to give yourself time.
I just want to read one comment someone posted on the Facebook group. Chef AJ inspired me and changed my life.
Aww.
Once you understand food density, you'll never quote unquote diet again. I start every day with a huge bowl of raw veggies and my whole day is set up for success. It feels so good to know every mouthful of food you feed yourself is nourishing. So
thank you so much. Yeah, and what she means by density, it's something called caloric density, which is right here, which is completely different than counting calories. And we're talking about eating in the greens and eating as much food as you want to the left of the red line. And yeah, you set yourself up for success when you start the day with greens or vegetables. Start your day in a savory way.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Cersei, did you have any?
There was a couple questions, which I think you kind of answered this already, Chef AJ. Stevia and agave, are they a no?
Well, they're for me. I can't, yeah. I am not the food police as much as I'd love to be. So I think it depends what your goals are. If your goals are managing food addictions or weight loss, then I would say they're definitely a no. Let's take stevia first. I think it's a no for everybody, because if you understand anything about the gut microbiome, which is like the new frontier in medicine, I interviewed 40 doctors last year for what's called the GI Health Summit, and all of them gave thumbs down to all the artificial sweeteners. And yes, stevia is not artificial, it's from the green leaf, most people that eat stevia aren't eating the leaf. They're eating a very highly processed liquid or powder that you can't make in your own kitchen, that's thousands of times sweeter than sugar. And what happens, you have these taste buds on your tongue that detect sweet. And that's because then when you taste sweet, the calories are coming, your brain gets all excited. And then what happens with these 0-calorie sweeteners, whether it's stevia, erythritol, xylitol, mannitol, aspartame, whatever it is the calories don't really come. And so what happens is the insulin response still happens, and you just end up getting hungrier, because as bad as sugar is, I'd rather have people eat sugar than stevia. It's a nightmare for the gut microbiome, and it just tastes terrible. It really does. I mean, no chef in the world will tell you to use it. It's really bitter and disgusting, but it's like the diet sodas. You get addicted to it. Stevia's I know people, they was addicted to stevia as sugar, and they'd walk around with these little dropper bottles, and they'd have to put it in their water, everything they ate or drank. So I would recommend sugar over stevia. Now, agave, again, it's higher in fructose than even high fructose corn syrup, which means it's metabolized in the liver. My litmus test of whether or not you should eat something is, can you make it in your own kitchen easily? And if you can't, I don't know anyone that can make stevia powder or stevia liquid or agave or maple syrup or honey or barley malt. I can make date syrup in my kitchen. I mean, it takes some time. You got to boil the dates and blend them and reduce it, but I can make that. So agave, I don't recommend it, even if it may be, quote, lower glycemic. So what? I mean, Haagen-Dazs ice cream is lower on the glycemic index than carrots. So I don't think the glycemic index it's only one thing to look at. Most people don't eat one food at a time anyway. So yeah, sugar is sugar, oil is oil, salt is salt. They're all bad. Just because one might be less bad doesn't mean it's good. So if your goal is recovery from food addiction and weight loss, the only sweetener you want is whole natural fruit.
Yes.
All right, one last question, and I think you answered this, but it was a nice sum up. Do the junk food cravings ever go away on this journey?
Well, I can't say yes or no without knowing the individual and their circumstances. I can say that for me, they did. And I think they certainly lessen over time. But again, if you're in an unclean environment, the answer is no. Because you're always going to be, and if all you do is subscribe to food blogs and look at recipes and subscribe to Cooking Light and look at recipes and watch the Food Network, then the answer is no. But if you get rid of all those environmental cues and you eat a nutrient-rich diet like the one I'm recommending, over time it lessens. Now, does that mean you'll not, like, I had this craving, I don't know, like a month ago, like out of the blue, like and it was nothing emotional going on. All of a sudden I'm thinking, God, I want some black licorice. That was like my favorite candy, and I don't know why. Like so yes, they can, but it was fleeting, and it was like, was I going to act on it? I was like, eh. And then I thought, well, you know what? They have tea now that tastes like that. If I really, so I can't tell you for you like 100% to promise that they'll go away forever. But if you clean your environment and you eat this way, they're going to get less and less and less until they're just sort of like, like, look, do you know anybody that only has pure thoughts 100% of the time? We all have thoughts like, gosh, that driver just cut me. I just want to kill them all. What a jerk.
You don't act on it. Yeah.
Exactly. So cravings are like thoughts, and they can be very fleeting. And if you don't want to, if you want them to go away, what you do is you don't engage them. So the thing is when you give into a craving, people think, it's like when you have an itch and you scratch it, then often it gets worse and it gets infected. But if you just kind of don't scratch the itch, eventually it goes away, especially if you distract yourself and do something else. And it's the same thing with cravings. When you give into the craving, you intensify it and you make it worse. So yeah, they can be tough. And cravings can, a lot of times they can be based in some emotional thing that's gone on. You have some incident, or, you remember like, I don't know, it was the anniversary of somebody that died, and you remember that person, and you always had a certain food with that person. So there can be some, I'm not saying that there's no emotional aspect to this, but what I am saying is when you get rid of the addictive foods, that emotional thing and the cravings, it gets dialed way, 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 way down, especially if you're eating a nutrient-rich diet, starting the day with greens, and really learning to enjoy your food. And you can learn to make things that taste as good. So like, like I can make an apple pie that's made out of apples and dates and oats, and it's like delicious, and it tastes like, I mean, I make it for regular people, and so what I'm saying is like there's certain things you can do. You want something cold and creamy, you can make banana ice cream. So it's not about deprivation, it's about finding substitutions for the things that are really problematic for you, that you enjoy as much and in time will enjoy more. But will they go away 100% for all people? No. But do they get a lot better? Yeah. I can't, I mean, like I said, that's the only craving I can think of really in the last 10 years, when I don't know why, like black licorice, maybe I saw a commercial, maybe I smelled it. I don't know. Smelling can make, that's the thing. That's why it's so hard living with somebody that's eating differently, because, you're trying to do your best and they're sitting there eating popcorn in front of the TV at night. You can smell that popcorn. You can hear the crunch, so it's really hard because cues can be, you can hear them, you can smell them, you can see them. So that's why I recommend a clean environment if at all possible.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I think our time is about up. Chef AJ, thank you so very much for joining us here today. We sincerely appreciate you. And for those watching live and on the replay, thank you for joining us. Definitely pick up a copy of her books. Chef AJ, your website, you want to just give that to
It's just my name, chefaj.com. Took a while to get, but I finally got my name back.
And also be sure to follow her on Facebook and Instagram as well. And she's got a YouTube channel. So
yeah, that would be my favorite place for you to connect with me, because I'm not as active on the other two, but YouTube, I have been live every day since March 20th, 2020. I think I'm at 520 shows now. And you guys are coming on, I believe it's in August.
Yeah, do we want to talk about that for a quick minute? You want an iron chef thing, I think.
That's going to be fabulous. I'm trying to look up the date, see if I can find it.
Yeah,
Was it in August? I seem to remember.
I think it's on the 12th, I think. Let me see.
That's right. It's Thursday, August 12th. You got a good memory. It's going to be great.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to that. All right. So thanks, everybody. And we will see you in the group.
All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Eat your greens.